Mavuika has been perhaps one of the most controversial characters in a while, with many people claiming she is worse than Xiangling or Arlecchino. But how true is that actually? Surely Mavuika is the best Pyro character, right? She's the Archon after all. Well, she's got quite the competition. So let's figure it out, shall we? Is Mavuika the best Pyro character? First, I want to figure out who the best Pyro DPS is, then Sub-DPS, and then support. Afterwards, I'll be taking the winners of each category and putting them against each other to see who is truly the best Pyro character. Starting with DPS. This video would be way too long if I discussed them all, so I'll be looking at the 4 characters that most people can agree are the biggest contenders. Those being Mavuika, Arlecchino, Lyney, and Hu Tao. I want to establish what I'm going to be looking at for the DPS category. Those being, first of all, damage. A DPS's whole job is to do damage, so it's very important that you get that part right. Then I also find usability quite important. If a DPS is really hard to actually get damage out of, the majority of the player base can't even use them. And then also team options. If a DPS is able to use multiple teams, it means you are not completely cooked by lacking one specific character, making them more valuable to an account. Starting with the funeral director herself. And let it be known, the only reason I'm discussing her at all is because otherwise I'm gonna get 3 billion comments about her. Now to discuss the first category, damage. This is the one that Hu Tao very clearly takes the biggest L in compared to the competition. Her damage ceiling is completely eclipsed by that of even Lyney. It's to a point where the best teams are the ones we are actively prioritizing buffing Farina and Yelan. Not much else to say here. A 100k charge attack vape is nice and all, but I just can't compare it to what we have now. Especially when at C0, it requires more effort than both Arlecchino and Mavuika. Damn, Hu Tao taking L's in 2 out of 3 categories is crazy. Jump cancelling is not even a super hard technique. It just requires some practice, and you should get it every time. The issue here is that it's even needed at all. Arlecchino and Mavuika are literally brain damage, so why even bother with Hu Tao? As for a team variety, it's pretty much all double hydro, so if your Farina is taken, you lose a lot of damage. While it is playable without Farina, it just isn't worth it. Next up, Lyney. His damage is actually very good. All those YouTube showcases you dismissed? Yeah, no need. Lyney can actually do that. I was honestly kinda surprised when I got him. The damage he can do is real. You may be able to tell from the footage that this damage is really good. Usability, however, is where he starts to falter. While much like Hu Tao, his usability issues can be solved with practice, it still requires more skill and enemy knowledge. While you can choose to use your ultimate when you need to iframe and walk around to dodge the rest, knowing exactly when the ult is required can be more effort than people would like to invest. As for his teams, much like Hu Tao, he really likes his Farina, and he also really likes his Bennett. But that final slot's more flexible. Xilonen, Kazuha, and Xiangling are all good options here. Now, I'm gonna take the time to discuss Arlecchino. Her damage is around the same level as Lyney if we look at them on a C0 R1 level, but I doubt I have to talk much more about Arlecchino's damage. We all know it, and not all of us love it. Arlecchino can do a disgustingly large amount of damage. Usability for Arlecchino is also one of her strongest points. Where Hu Tao has to learn a cancel that needs specific timing, and Lyney can be interrupted during his charge attack, Arlecchino does not have an issue that is quite as glaring. Sure, she can't heal, but how many enemies in Genshin will actually kill you if you have even the slightest amount of dodging capabilities? That's right, nearly none. The damage would have to be over an extended period of time, which means you can easily react once you get to low HP and use her ult for the emergency heal. Usability is not a big issue for Arlecchino, on the vast majority of enemies at least. She also has a good amount of teams, unlike Lyney or Hu Tao. She is capable of exploiting Overload and Melt to certain degrees, both those archetypes featuring plenty of different characters that are not in the standard Vape team. So flexibility is a very strong aspect that Arlecchino has, and that's not even talking about things like Emily Burning. But can Mavuika compete with all this? Well, for her damage, oh my lord, her damage far surpasses any of the other Pyro DPSs. And when I say far, I mean it. Where Arlecchino can do 200k on her normal attacks, Mavuika can do that on her charge attack, and guess what? Mavuika also has an elemental burst that can nuke for over 600k when vaped. Mavuika definitely takes the cake on damage. Usability? Don't even get me started. She has Arlecchino's brain-dead inputs while not losing the ability to heal. The only thing she really falters in is team flexibility, since she really wants a Nat lane character. But guess what? She makes it work. Shallonen is one of the most broken units in the game, and she uses Night Soul. Even then, there's the F2P alternative of Kachina. Is Vape not your style? Try a melt team with Citlali, Rosaria, and Bennett. Dual carry with someone like Navi is also a very strong team. She has a restriction, but it's a restriction that's easily solved. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give the win for best DPS to Mavuika. Next up, best sub-DPS. This is going to be a bit of a shorter category, because the competition is not that extensive. It's literally just Xiangling. For this section, the criteria will be simple. Again, damage output. As a sub-DPS, it is expected that you can contribute to the team's damage in a meaningful way. And then energy requirement. Now I know this feels like I'm just trying to grief Xiangling here, but if you have an ER requirement of 250%, it really doesn't matter how high your damage potential is, because you just won't burst. And then finally, application. There are some teams where application is relevant, like a Mualani Vape team, so it is important that your application is good. First of all, Xiangling. When we look at her damage output, it fluctuates a lot. Her damage ceiling is really high, but its floor is really low. This ultimately does come down to ER requirements, because Xianglings are insanely high. Even when using Bennett as a Pyro battery, you still easily go above the 200%. Balancing your ER with your damaging stats can at times just simply not be worth it, so this is a big L towards Xiangling. When we get to application, it is actually higher than Mavuika's, but this isn't as big of a win as you would think it is. But first, let's discuss Mavuika. Now, there's Mavuika, and when we talk about her damage, it doesn't fluctuate nearly as much as Xiangling's. She is not capable of snapshotting buffs like Xiangling can, which means her damage ceiling is quite a bit lower than that of Xiangling. But guess what? Her complete lack of ER requirements makes it so her damage floor is way higher than Xiangling's. Overall, in the important teams, Mavuika is going to be outperforming Xiangling damage-wise. Xiangling will win in national teams, but it's not as good of a core as it used to be. As for her application, it is worse than Xiangling, yes, but what we have to think about is how many teams actually care. The best teams in the game right now that would use these two are Mualani Vape and Kenichi Burning, both of which being perfectly fine with Mavuika's slower rate of application. Other teams that use Xiangling like Overload just don't care at all, as long as the Pyro application is consistent, which, again, Mavuika's is. Xiangling will be required for something like Nuvalet Vape, but the teams where Xiangling is needed for her application don't outweigh all the teams where Mavuika wins. So overall, I'm gonna have to give the win to Mavuika again. And then finally, supports. In this category, I'll be looking at Bennett, Shev, and then Mavuika herself. For supports, I want to look at how much they're able to boost the team's damage output, as well as any potential additional utility they offer to the team. But something that I want to stress extra hard is flexibility. The best supports are those who are best in slot in a lot of teams, so this priority has the biggest weight. First off, Bennett. This guy's just a classic. An attack buff that will easily go over 1000 within just his base kit is incredible. There's a reason that he is always paired with attack-based DPS characters. His buffs are so enormous that he is less replaceable than meta juggernauts like Farina and Shallonen. No one is able to buff raw damage as much as Bennett. And that's not even to mention he has some of the strongest heals in the game. Sure, he only works with attack-based characters, but that's hardly a restriction when such a large part of Genshin's cast is attack scaling. I do want to say though, that Nuvalet and Mualani being so dominant in their respective scenarios does mean it is a worthy consideration to make. But come on! Bennett's sheer dominance in the attack buffing niche is unparalleled. Then there's Chevreuse. While her buffing is capable of surpassing that of Bennett, granting up to 60% damage bonus, 40% rich red, and 40% attack, I simply can't say she compares to Bennett. While she, much like Bennett, can heal, it's not as much per tick, meaning she can't let you face tank as well. Her team restriction also makes it so I simply cannot say she is as good as Bennett is. And I'm sorry Mavuika, but it's gonna have to be a similar story here. Mavuika, in theory, sounds like a crazy support, capable of buffing damage bonus for up to 40%, while also being a Cinder City holder, which will give 40% more damage bonus. That sounds absurd, right? Well, not until you look at the fact that she really wants other Night Soul characters for her damage buff. And when you add a Shalonen, she is gonna be the one holding Cinder City, leaving Mavuika with only half of her buffing potential. Even in a Kenichi Emily team, Cinder City is just worse than holding Deepwood, which is funny because anyone can hold Deepwood. Although she does enable for Emily to run Deepwood, and the Mavuika runs Cinder, so she can still use Cinder, but you would be sacrificing Emily's damage to do so. She also doesn't provide any additional utility other than her damage and application. While it is nice, it can't make up for Bennett's sheer dominance in the teams he has played in. The support win is gonna have to go to Bennett, so 2 wins for Mavuika and 1 for Bennett. You would think that means Mavuika is the best Pyro character, but I can't say I agree, because Bennett's relevance as being the attack buffer in the game simply cannot be understated here. You have to compare Mavuika's use cases to that of Bennett. When you play DPS Mavuika, you're using Bennett. Bennett is also a better support than Mavuika. This means that the only category where Bennett doesn't outdo Mavuika is as a sub-DPS. But when you think about it, the only archetypes where you don't just use both of them are Overload and Mualani Vape. This means that Bennett is almost always used alongside Mavuika, while Bennett also has way more teams that don't use Mavuika at all, like a Wanderer or Arlecchino team. And before you say that Mavuika as a DPS beats Arlecchino, like I said before, she is using Bennett. But that's just my take. Do you agree with my opinions or not? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And while you are down there, may as well like and subscribe. If you want to get into a discussion with me, be sure to join my Discord or follow me on Twitter, which are linked in the description. Also, additionally, for all the Wuthering Waves enjoyers out there, for all the Wuthering Waves enjoyers out there, I'm going to be live streaming my first reactions to Wuthering Waves 2.0 on January 2nd on these times in these time zones. I would love to have you there. But that'll be it from me. Peace.